In 1945, as Allied forces closed in on Germany, a unit of Nazi soldiers abandoned a remote castle deep in the forests of Bohemia. They left in the middle of the night. They left behind equipment, documents, personal belongings. They left in such a hurry that some of their meals were still on the table. They were not fleeing the Allies. They were fleeing what they had found beneath the castle floor. Whatever was down there, whatever they discovered in those underground chambers, none of them ever spoke about it publicly. Not one. The records were destroyed. The experiments they were conducting were erased from official history. This castle is number 7 on our list tonight. Stay with me until number 1, because number 1 is not just the most haunted castle in Europe, it is the most disturbing building that has ever stood on this continent. And when you hear what happened inside it, you will understand why some doors are better left locked. Welcome. Tonight we are counting down the 10 most haunted castles in Europe, from the unsettling to the truly terrifying. Every castle on this list has documented reports, historical records, or eyewitness accounts that have never been fully explained. Let's get into it. Castle number 10, Leap Castle. Our list begins in the Green Hills of County Offaly, Ireland, with a castle that has been described by paranormal researchers as one of the most genuinely evil locations on the planet. Not haunted, evil. That is a distinction that people who have investigated Leap Castle are very careful to make. Leap Castle was built in the 13th century by the O'Carroll clan, one of the most violent and ruthless families in medieval Irish history. In 1532, a member of the clan murdered his own brother, who happened to be a priest, in the castle's chapel, midway through delivering Mass in front of the congregation. The chapel has been called the Bloody Chapel ever since. But the darkest discovery came centuries later, during renovations in 1900. Workers clearing out a hidden chamber beneath the Bloody Chapel broke through a floor and found a drop shaft, an oubliette, a room with no door, a room you could only enter by falling into it. It was full of human remains. Not one body, not 5, enough skeletons to fill 3 cartloads. Some historians believe prisoners were thrown in alive and left to die on the metal spikes at the bottom. Workers also reported something they could not explain, a smell coming from the walls, not decay, something older, something that had no source. Then there is the elemental. Multiple visitors and investigators over the past century have described the same figure, roughly human in shape, roughly human in size, but wrong. A face like decomposing flesh, dark mass behind it, moving through the castle with no particular urgency, as if it owns the place. Because perhaps it does. Castle number 9, Bran Castle. Most people know Bran Castle by its other name, Dracula's Castle. And before you assume this is simply tourist marketing, let me tell you what the castle actually is and what actually happened there. Bran Castle sits on a rocky cliff in Transylvania, at the border between Wallachia and Transylvania, a border that in the 15th century was one of the most contested and violent regions in all of Europe. The castle was a fortress, a customs checkpoint, and a prison. It was cold, remote, and designed to be intimidating. The connection to Vlad the Impaler, the man historians believe inspired Bram Stoker's Dracula, is disputed. He may have been imprisoned here briefly. What is not disputed is what Vlad did throughout the region. He impaled his enemies on wooden stakes and left them on display for months, thousands of them. The smell could reportedly be detected from miles away. Whether or not Vlad ever lived in Bran Castle, the darkness followed it. Visitors report cold spots that move through rooms with no air source. A figure seen in the upper corridors, tall, thin, dressed in black, that appears and disappears without explanation. And there are the tunnels, running beneath the castle, deeper than any official map shows. What is at the end of them, no one has publicly confirmed. Number 8. Château de Brissac. France has no shortage of haunted châteaux, but Château de Brissac, standing at 7 stories and over 50 rooms, is the tallest castle in France and arguably its most tragically haunted. The ghost that walks its corridors has a name. She is called the Green Lady, and she has been seen for centuries. Her story begins in the 15th century with Charlotte de Brissac, a noblewoman who lived in the castle with her husband, Jacques de Brissac. Jacques discovered Charlotte with another man. What happened next is recorded in the family's own historical documents. He killed them both, here, inside these walls. Charlotte never left. Guests who have stayed in the castle's tower rooms, which are still available to rent, report waking to the sound of moaning, not wind through the walls, moaning. And when they sit up in bed, they see her, a woman in a green dress, standing at the foot of the bed, her face described as horribly disfigured, hollow eyes, a gaping mouth. She does not speak, she does not move toward them, she simply stands there, and then she is gone. The current owners of the chateau are well aware of their permanent resident. They speak of her matter-of-factly. She has been part of the castle for 550 years. She is not going anywhere. Castle number 7, Houska Castle, Bohemia, Czech Republic, built c. 1253. This is the castle from our opening, and now I will tell you everything. Houska Castle was built in the 13th century in the forests of Bohemia, in what is now the Czech Republic. And the moment you know its location, a single question becomes impossible to ignore. Why is it here? The castle has no strategic value. It sits on no trade route. It has no water source within its walls. It was not built near a town, village, or any population it could have protected. It has no fortifications facing outward, only inward, as if it was designed not to keep people out, but to keep something in. Beneath the castle is a pit, a naturally occurring pit in the rock, going down further than anyone has been willing to measure. In the Middle Ages, local legends described it as a gateway, a physical opening between the world of the living and whatever lies beneath it. When the Bohemian ruling family ordered the castle built, they made a specific decision. Before the walls went up, criminals on death row were offered a full pardon if they agreed to be lowered into the pit on a rope and report what they found. The first man to go down came back up with his hair completely white. He had aged, by all accounts, by approximately 30 years. He could not speak coherently. He died within 2 days. Others refused to go at all and accepted execution instead. The castle was built over the pit, sealed, and then, in 1945, it was occupied by a unit of the SS, the Nazi Occult Research Division. They conducted experiments here for reasons that were never officially explained. When they fled, they burned what they could. What they could not burn, they buried. The pit is still there, beneath the chapel floor, sealed, but there. Headless black horses have been reported galloping through the courtyard at night, half-human figures seen in the surrounding forest, and a persistent feeling, reported by almost every visitor, that something beneath the floor is aware of your presence. Castle number 6, Edinburgh Castle. Edinburgh Castle is one of the most studied haunted locations in the world. Not investigated by ghost hunters with cameras, studied by scientists with controlled methodology. In 2001, Dr. Richard Wiseman of the University of Hertfordshire conducted one of the largest paranormal investigations ever carried out. 240 volunteers were sent into the castle, specifically into the underground vaults beneath the Royal Mile, without being told which rooms were reportedly haunted and which were not. The results were striking. Volunteers in the rooms with documented paranormal histories reported significantly more unusual experiences than those in the control rooms. Cold spots, a feeling of presence, clothes being tugged, shadowy figures seen at the edge of vision. One volunteer had to be removed from a specific vault because she became too distressed to continue. She later described a face pressing towards hers from the dark. She had been standing in the most reported room in the entire castle. Edinburgh Castle has over 900 years of documented history, sieges, executions, imprisonment, and death. The dungeons held prisoners of war from 4 different centuries. The sounds of a phantom drummer, first reported in 1650, have been documented repeatedly in the centuries since. He is said to appear before the castle comes under threat. He has been heard 3 times in the past 100 years. Each time, within months, something significant happened to the castle or the city it watches over. Castle number 5, Predjama Castle. Halfway up a 123-meter cliff face built directly into the mouth of a cave, Predjama Castle in Slovenia looks like something a troubled architect designed after a fever dream, and its history matches its appearance entirely. The castle was home in the 15th century to a knight named Erasem Luger, a man the Slovenian people still consider something of a folk hero. He was an outlaw, a rebel. He had killed an imperial court official in a dispute, and rather than flee the country, he fortified Predjama Castle and dared the Habsburg army to come and get him. They came with a full siege force. Erasem held them off for over a year. From inside his cave castle, with tunnels running back through the mountain, his allies smuggled him food and supplies, fresh cherries, roast ox, wine. He would display them from the battlements to mock the besieging army below. They could not take the castle by force, so they did what armies have always done when force fails. They bribed someone. A servant inside the castle agreed to signal the artillery when Erasem visited the latrine, the castle's toilet in a vulnerable corner of the fortification. The signal was a candle in the window. The timing was impeccable. Erasem Luger, the unconquerable outlaw knight of Predjama, was killed by a cannonball while sitting on the toilet. His ghost is said to walk the cave tunnels beneath the castle, not in armor, not on horseback, just a figure moving through the dark, carrying what witnesses describe as a look of profound indignity. Castle number 4, Frankenstein Castle. You know the name, but you do not know the truth behind it. Frankenstein Castle stands on a ridge above the Rhine Valley in Germany, and it has existed since the 13th century. The name predates the novel by 500 years, and what happened here in the 18th century is far more disturbing than anything Mary Shelley put on paper. His name was Johann Conrad Dippel. He was born in this castle in 1673. He grew up to become an alchemist, a theologian, and, by most accounts, a man with a profound obsession with the boundary between life and death. Dippel conducted experiments in Frankenstein Castle that locals documented with increasing horror. He was accused of grave robbing, of stealing bodies from nearby cemeteries and bringing them back to the castle for purposes no one could officially confirm. He developed a substance he called Dippel's oil, a compound he claimed could extend life. The process required boiling down human and animal remains. He claimed in his own writings to have discovered the secret of reanimation. He claimed to have brought the dead back to life. Whether or not he succeeded, the legends he inspired among local villagers were so powerful that they persisted for a century after his death. Mary Shelley traveled through this region in 1814, 2 years before she began writing Frankenstein. She stopped in nearby towns. She heard the stories. She always denied Dipple was her inspiration, but the castle and the man who worked within it have a very specific relationship to a very specific novel, and that relationship has never been fully explained. Castle number 3, Château de Thoury. Most of the castles on this list are famous, visited by thousands, photographed, documented, discussed. Château de Thoury is almost unknown outside France. It sits in the Allier region, surrounded by farmland, and it has been frozen, deliberately, obsessively frozen since the mid-19th century. The family that owns it has changed almost nothing since 1820. The furniture is original. The wallpaper is original. The personal belongings of people who died 200 years ago are still exactly where they left them. They did this in mourning, and the presence they created by refusing to let the past go appears, by all accounts, to have had consequences. Staff who have worked in the chateau over the decades describe a persistent, overwhelming sense of being watched. Not in the obvious rooms, in the corridors, on staircases, in doorways, always at the threshold of spaces, never fully inside them. Objects move, not dramatically. A book shifted to the other side of the table, a chair turned to face a different direction. Small things, consistent things, things that happened when no one was in the room and which no one can explain. The East Wing is the most reported. A woman in period dress has been seen there by multiple independent witnesses across different decades. She does not appear to be aware of being observed. She moves purposefully, unhurriedly through a castle that has not changed since she was alive. As if for her, nothing has changed. As if she simply never left. Castle number 2, Chillingham Castle. Number 2 on our list sits in the remote hills of Northumberland, England, and it has been called by multiple paranormal investigators the most genuinely haunted building in the entire United Kingdom. Chillingham Castle has stood since the 1100s. For 900 years, it has been the home of one family, the Earls of Tankerville. 900 years of births, deaths, wars, executions, and torture. The castle's dungeon still contains its original torture equipment, and records show it was used regularly well into the 1600s. But of all the dark things that happened inside these walls, the most disturbing centers on a single room, the Pink Room. For as long as anyone could remember, people who slept in the Pink Room reported the same thing. In the middle of the night, they would wake up suddenly to the sound of a child moaning, not crying, moaning, coming from somewhere inside the wall. This went on for decades. Guests complained. Owners dismissed it. Then, during renovations in the early 20th century, workers began breaking down the walls of the Pink Room to modernize the plumbing. Inside one of the walls, sealed completely, they found a hidden cavity, and inside that cavity was the skeleton of a young boy. He was surrounded by the remnants of blue fabric. No one knows how he got there. No one knows how long he had been there, and no record of his death has ever been found. The boy was given a proper burial in the castle grounds, and from that night forward, the moaning stopped. The Pink Room has been silent ever since. Hold the silence, 2 full seconds, then continue, quieter. But the boy did not leave entirely. A glowing blue apparition, small, child-sized, has been seen in the corridor outside the Pink Room by multiple guests and staff members, always at night, always moving toward the same wall where the body was found, as if he is still looking for a way out.
Castle number 1, Houska Castle, the full story. We return to Houska Castle, but this time I am going to tell you everything. When I described this place earlier, I told you about the pit, about the prisoners who were lowered into it, about the man who came back white-haired and broken, I told you about the Nazi occupation, but I did not tell you what the Nazis found, and I did not tell you what has been seen in and around this castle across 8 centuries of documented history. Let us start at the beginning. The pit beneath Houska Castle is not a dungeon. It is not a well. It is not a natural geological formation with a boring explanation. Medieval Czech records describe it as a bresna, a term that translates roughly as a breach, a tear, a place where the barrier between the physical world and something else had worn thin or broken entirely. The records describe creatures emerging from the pit, not ghosts, not spirits in the conventional sense, half-formed things described in the texts as having human characteristics combined with characteristics of animals that do not exist, winged, multi-limbed, moving in ways that violated the expected rules of how bodies move. The ruling Premyslid family commissioned the castle specifically to seal the pit. The chapel was built directly over it. The floor of the chapel is the ceiling of the pit, and the chapel contains something unusual, something that no religious historian has ever satisfactorily explained: the frescoes. In the chapel of Houska Castle, painted on the walls and ceiling in the 13th century, are images that should not exist in a Christian place of worship. A woman, depicted in the style of a left-handed archer, shooting downward into darkness. Figures that are not saints, not angels, not any recognized iconography from medieval Christian tradition. Scholars have been debating their meaning since the castle was opened to researchers in the 20th century. The most common conclusion is that they are protective, that they were painted not to worship, but to warn or to hold something back. Now, 1945. The SS unit that occupied Houska Castle during the war was attached, according to post-war documents recovered by Czech historians, to Himmler's Honornerb, the Nazi Occult Research Division. The Honornerb was specifically tasked with investigating locations of supernatural or occult significance across occupied Europe. They were not there by accident. The documents that survived describe a series of experiments conducted in the lower chambers of the castle, directly adjacent to the pit. The nature of those experiments was redacted in every surviving copy. What is visible in the documents is the outcome notation, a single phrase repeated across multiple reports: "Do not open further." They left in the night. They left their meals. They left their documents. They burned what they could and ran. And the Czech families who returned to the region after the war reported that for weeks after the German departure, the animals in the surrounding forest, the deer, the birds, the foxes, stayed completely away from the castle and its grounds, as if the forest itself was giving the building space. Today, Houska Castle is open to visitors. You can walk its grounds. You can visit the chapel. You can stand on the floor above the pit and look at the frescoes on the walls and wonder what the people who painted them knew. And almost every visitor reports the same thing. Not fear exactly, something older than fear, a sense of pressure, as if the air in the castle is slightly, persistently wrong, as if something beneath the floor is breathing, slowly, patiently, as if it has been waiting for 8 centuries and is entirely comfortable waiting longer. The most disturbing building in Europe. 10 castles, 9 countries, 8 centuries of things that have no comfortable explanation. I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want to know the answer, so please leave it in the comments. If you had to spend one night alone in any castle on this list, which one would you choose, and which one would you absolutely refuse, no matter what? I'll tell you mine. I would spend the night in Predjama, because at least Erasm's ghost seems to have a sense of humor, and I would not go near Houska Castle, not for any amount of money, not after researching what is beneath that chapel floor. If you made it to the end of this video,
Thank you, genuinely. This one took a long time to research, and I hope it delivered. If it did, please subscribe. There are more videos like this coming, and the next one covers locations that make this list look like a pleasant countryside tour. I'll see you there.